Please welcome Tzeporah Berman.
It's a real honor to be here on the traditional unceded territory of the Tsleil-Waututh Nation tonight. And it really is a real gift. I have long admired the Tsleil-Waututh's work on wind energy and more recently on solar energy. Also just the incredible courageous stand that the nation has taken on many issues, and particularly inspired by the work on Kinder Morgan, because I don't know if any of you have seen it, but there is research and documentation about this high that the Tsleil-Waututh have done for their court case. And I think that the comprehensive kind of evidence-based work on Kinder Morgan, I really believe the Tsleil-Waututh have set a new standard of marrying science and Indigenous knowledge and rights. And I think that's incredibly important for how we look at all of these infrastructure projects in the future, so thank you. I thought a lot about how I could contribute to this conversation tonight, and since I've had the opportunity to do quite a bit of work globally on climate and energy issues and on renewable energy, I thought what I'd try and do is bring that global context and perspective here this evening and basically update you on some global trends, because I think these global trends need to inform our decision making here in this province and on this land about how we are building the yes agenda and the economy that we want. First, I think we can't really talk about the yes agenda and a global perspective without understanding the context that we're in and recognizing that this conversation really couldn't be more urgent. We're now, as I'm sure many of you know from our own experience here in British Columbia, experiencing climate change now around the world, and it's escalating faster than anyone predicted. Alongside soaring temperatures, other records have been set this year, from vanishing Arctic sea ice to the bleaching of coral reefs, to the unprecedented wildfires across North America, record flooding that's been devastating communities around the world, and of course the strongest hurricanes in both the northern and southern hemisphere, and record droughts now as well globally. The scientists that I've been speaking to internationally are saying that it's all happening far faster than they predicted. And we now know that more people lose their homes due to climate change globally than war. We know that this is now the most serious issue at every level that we face. It's a human rights issue, it's a social justice issue, it's an economic issue, it's an environmental issue. And the fact is, when we talk about the yes agenda, we can't forget that context and how quickly we need to move, because of course there's a lot of people who stand in the way of the yes agenda, because sometimes it's hard to see yes when you're constantly bombarded by the incumbents, those with tremendous, who stand to benefit from the status quo, from maintaining the economy that we have, who stand to gain from continuing a dependence on oil and gas. But I think what you'll see tonight is that it's very clear that despite Trump, despite Kinder Morgan, the future is cleaner and renewable. But of course, when we talk about the global context and on our domestic context for the yes agenda, we can't forget that it's not just climate change. This is about human rights, it's about treaty rights, it's about the potential for oil spills on our incredible coast. It's about the fact that we know that our energy systems today are literally killing people. That pollution is killing more people than wars, obesity, smoking, and malnutrition. And we have the capacity to have clean, safe energy systems now. So we have a tremendous fight ahead of us and a very short time to figure it out. New data is showing that we're making great gains phasing out coal. Canada is now committed to phasing out coal. Many countries around the world are now starting to do that. We're increasing solar globally, wind, hydro, biomass. Yet look what's increasing the fastest. Still today, oil and gas globally are increasing faster than any other energy source. And a part of that global context is that we know we can't allow that to happen. We can negotiate and talk all we want about the issues and debate them here at home, but the atmosphere doesn't negotiate. There's a finite amount of carbon that the atmosphere can hold before that blanket of carbon literally starts smothering the Earth. We're already at today, I think, 403 parts per million of carbon in our atmosphere. We know if we get to about 450 that climate change happens in a way that is uncontrollable. So we could at that point ban all cars from the planet and have solar on every household. But we would only be able to see how we can adapt our society to a changing climate. And because we would have lost so much sea ice. So when we look at the global carbon budget, what we know is that we need to keep 2/3 of our remaining fossil fuels in the ground. 2/3 of what we know of our fossil fuels in the ground. And if we look at what's already under production around the world, if you add up what's under production or construction of oil, gas, and coal around the world, that would already equal 2 degrees worth of carbon. So any new projects or exploration at this point puts more fossil fuels into the system than the world can safely burn. So what do we do about it? The fact is, change is happening quickly. This is the point that my son would always say, "Mom, can you change the bummer channel and get to the good stuff?" The fact is, everywhere we look right now, we're seeing incredible change. And social change, it's not linear. It doesn't happen at a pace in every major social change in our history. It happens at tipping point moments. And that's what we're living right now, globally and locally. We are living that tipping point moment where we will re-envision industrial society. That's what's happening. So in the last 5 years, we've seen more changes in technology than in the last 50. We're seeing more changes in policy than we ever thought would have been possible in a decade in the last year. So just to give you a sense, I want to make sure people understand that this will happen. We are moving to a low-carbon economy. Prices are plummeting. Technology is changing. The fact is, how fast? And for each jurisdiction, that's the choice that we have to make. And I think that it's very clear that Canada will also be dragged along into a low-carbon economy or will lead. And we now are lucky enough to be out of the dark days, as we call them, of the decade of lost climate policy. We're starting to see climate policy in Canada. We're starting to see a recognition of this. But the pace of change that needs to happen requires all of us to engage for the yes agenda and to stand up to the projects that shouldn't be built. So in the past 10 years, we've gone from 5 countries with climate policy and renewable energy policies to 168. Since 2004, the annual investment in renewable energy capacity has increased by more than 800%. Bloomberg New Energy Finance reported in April 2015 that the race for renewable energy has passed a turning point. The world is adding more capacity for renewable power each year than oil, natural gas, and coal combined. They actually meant just specifically for electricity. Transportation was a much harder issue. But now even on transportation, we're starting to see a massive shift in the last 12 months on electrification, on electric vehicles. And as a result, for the first time in industrial history, we are now seeing major international institutions predict that the demand for oil will peak and decline. And that's really critical in terms of meeting our climate challenge. And probably most exciting is the price of renewables is just plummeting. So as a result of it being accessible, as a result of the climate crisis, we're seeing more and more institutions step up to the plate. We now have 96 cities, states, and countries around the globe that have set 100% renewable energy targets, along with huge big-name businesses, Coca-Cola, Unilever, Goldman Sachs, Google, etc. 100% renewables. The first time we started campaigning on 100% renewables when I think it was probably over a decade, maybe even 15 years ago, that I participated in the first release of a report on 100% renewables with Greenpeace International, and we were laughed at the United Nations Climate Conference. Well, of course, that's not going to be possible. But now we have all of the 43 nations of the climate vulnerable nations internationally last year in Marrakesh standing up and committing to go 100% renewable, whole countries. So why is this happening? Because the change in technology has been so incredible and the drop in prices has been so quick. So we've seen costs go down for solar PV 82% in 6 years. Costs for wind energy 61% over the same time period. In many places around the world, we now see solar at price parity with coal or even cheaper than coal. That happened in India for most of this year. So we're now seeing in many places of the world that clean energy is meeting or beating fossil fuels as a lower cost electricity source, and it's quicker to build out than a coal plant or a nuclear plant. So many predictions are now saying within 10 years the cost of generating energy will fall very significantly. This is from the International Renewable Energy Agency report that came out only last month. They're predicting onshore wind will go down another 26% in 10 years, offshore wind by 35%, utility scale solar PV by 57%. So is it really alternative energy? Since 2011, renewable energy has been the preferred choice for new power globally. That's from Bloomberg New Energy Finance for electricity. So the preferred choice globally for electricity. Global electricity investment was higher than the investment in fossil fuel supply last year for the first time. So that's all fossil fuel supply, not just for electricity. That the investment that's going into electricity is now just tipped as being bigger than the investment that's going into fossil fuels. That's really exciting because ultimately what we need is an electrification of all of our systems, including transportation. And of course, the technological changes are incredible. We now have thin film solar PV. Soon we won't need renewable energy on our buildings. We'll have renewable energy buildings and windows. And electric vehicles, probably the most exciting story in 2017. The first 1 million electric vehicles took about 20 years. The second took about 18 months. The next 1 million will take about 10 months. That's the tipping point. That's how quickly we're moving on these issues. So you'll be told it's not feasible by the people who don't want it to happen. But it is feasible, it is happening, faster than we ever thought possible. So this is what we're saying yes to. It's not, of course, just energy production, but that stands a lot in our way as we talk about big projects like Kinder Morgan and other major infrastructure projects like LNG or more fracking in this province. Of course, the low-carbon economy and the YES agenda also has to include high-tech and clean-tech and knowledge-based economies. It means lifting up our service-based economies. It means lifting up our agriculture. But it also means seriously investing in these kind of solutions. Because, Mark, one of the benefits you didn't mention is that unlike an oil spill, a solar spill, it's just a sunny day. So this is what we're saying yes to. What India is saying yes to, a massive solar project, 900 million, a fraction of what Site C is proposed, but providing energy for 150,000 homes. China has now installed enough is now installing enough solar panels to cover 3 soccer fields every hour. China has just announced that they will be banning fossil fuel cars. Solar energy created 1 out of 50 new jobs in the US in 2016. And France has now announced that it will ban all new oil and gas exploration in its drive for renewable energy. Even Shell is having to install electric charges at UK petrol stations. And 518 institutions have now announced that they're divesting trillions of dollars from any fossil fuels. This is happening. And sometimes it doesn't seem fast enough. It seems too big, like it's not going to be possible. But every leadership stand, like what the Tsleil-Waututh is doing, matters. Every renewable energy project matters. Every time you call your MLA, every time you call your MP, this matters in this moment, in this decade. Because this change is happening and we're living it. Thank you.